Today's show is brought to you by 3C. Comprehensive Cannabis Consulting helps clients design, build, and optimize their cannabis business from initial assessment and planning through operationalization and ongoing management. To learn more about how their services are tailored to meet the unique goals and objectives of each of their clients, go to 3ccannabis.com. And for a limited time, 3C is giving all MJBulls listeners an additional 10% off their fees just for mentioning that you heard it on the show. Go to 3ccannabis.com.
You know the story about the butterfly coming out of the cocoon. You know, if the butterfly doesn't get squeezed out of the cocoon, the fluid doesn't get pushed into its wings to fly away. So if it just gets ripped out of the cocoon, it just kind of falls to the ground and can't really fly away. It needs to have that struggle. It needs to have that experience in order to be successful. And I think that's the most important part to the human life as well. It's very satisfying internally to know that you overcame something and became successful.
From Prominent Media, it's the MJBulls Podcast, a show about raising cannabis capital. I'm Dan Humiston, and on today's show, how this former firefighter fought his way up to build himself into an international cannabis venture capitalist. Today, the Cannabis Investor Spotlight is shining on Cody Shirk, co-founder of Explorer Equity Group, which is a private equity venture capital firm. Cody, welcome to the MJBulls Podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Really excited to be here.
You know, I got to start right with this. You started your career as a firefighter. How does somebody transition from being a firefighter to being an international investor?
Yeah, man. On one hand, it's a kind of fun story to tell, but on the other hand, it's really frustrating because in general, people, oh, you're a firefighter, you don't know anything. You didn't, grow up in the world of finance. So it's kind of this mixed emotions for me. But the basic story is my dad was a firefighter. Out of college, I became a firefighter, as most people follow their parents' footsteps. And when I became a firefighter, I kind of started to connect the dots of how do you become more successful? How do you take it to the next step? And I learned very quickly that if I worked as much as possible, which means did as much overtime as possible, I could become an accredited investor. And then I could do these private deals and all types of different industries. And that's what I did. And I lost a lot of money in the very beginning and made a lot of mistakes, but I got an MBA in hard knocks and making those mistakes. And at the same time, I was a firefighter too. I was working on an ALS rig, which is basically means we were providing advanced life support to patients that went through all types of emergencies. And one of the very common things was drug overdoses. And I was seeing all these different drugs and how nasty they are. And obviously we ran into cannabis all the time. And it was nothing. It was more innocent than alcohol. It created no problem. So through this whole process of being a firefighter and investing and learning a lot of things along the way, and my experience with cannabis, ran across this industry and said, oh my gosh, this is something that's so compelling. There's no way I cannot focus on this eventually. Oh yeah.
You're not alone. Obviously, a lot of people are moving into this direction, but before you got to cannabis, you got to tell our listeners about the Explorer partnership. I'm telling you, this is one of the coolest ideas. If I would have thought about this out of college, I would have been right with you.
Okay, so when I was a firefighter, I assumed that, I was making good money for when I was young compared to my peers, and I was very lucky to do that, but I was working really hard. Like literally, we were working 24-hour shifts, like 20 days a month. So I was like never home. But on my days off, I assumed that I was a small fish in a big pond of the U.S. So I was like, you know what? I got to go outside the U.S. to find these opportunities where I'm going to invest in. And keep in mind, I'm 24 years old thinking I'm strike it rich. So I'm going out into the world, finding all these awesome opportunities.
Let me stop you there for a second. You're leaving out a big part of this that you're not telling our listeners, but you're also a surfer. So you're going on these, you might be looking for investment opportunities, but you're looking for waves.
Yeah, that's the second part. I usually don't tell anybody because like, oh, you're a surfer bum. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So anyway, I try to never visit the same place twice because I'm naturally curious. So I go around the world looking for these waves. And I know that real estate in front of waves for surfers is almost priceless. Surfers are like a cult and they'll pay any amount of money to surf a great wave. So if you buy land in front of these waves, you are literally sitting on a gold mine. And that's what I did. I went through Central America and bought land up in front of these really good waves. In the middle of the jungle, I had to do this crazy due diligence of finding like landowners and tracking down ranchers and farmers and speaking Spanish and visiting lawyers and going back to the city and chopping to the jungle and like wearing snake boots. It was ridiculous.
That's crazy.
But I ended up doing really well in the real estate because I like found this niche that I knew about and did really well and rolled over a lot of the money into private equity and venture capital deals where I made a lot of mistakes. But yeah, that was the impetus to go out into the world and start exploring. And at the same time, I was writing about it because somebody had said, "Hey, Cody, you're doing some interesting stuff. You should write about it." Not so much to tell other people, but more so to keep yourself in check. So you can write down everything, see where you've been, where you're going. And it's kind of almost like a diary. And I started writing about this and people were reading it and like more and more people were reading it. Just kind of started expanding more and more. And then eventually people were like, "Hey, I want to invest with you on these ventures." And I was like, "I don't want you to invest with me because I don't want you to travel with me and you're a weirdo and I'm doing my own thing." And of course, very short-sighted at the time. And as I progressed into this more and more, I realized, hey, I need help with more investors to leverage up the ability for me to do bigger deals because as one person, you can do a lot as one person, but eventually you kind of run out of steam because you run out of time and capital, frankly. So I started this group called the Explore Partnership, and essentially it's a private social and investing group. And the emphasis on the social part is really cool because it's a lot of really like-minded people who are naturally curious and want to travel and find interesting opportunities. And what we do is we present investing opportunities. And we've done them all around the world, everywhere from Ukraine to Colombia to Hong Kong to London. I mean, literally everywhere. And one of the areas got really focused on several years ago was with cannabis. And it's just so compelling for us that we were touring cannabis grows in multiple different countries, finding different companies, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. So I know there's a lot there, but that's the basic transformation of how I got to where I am now.
Right. So that private investing syndicate you put together really took off so much. Was that the genesis for Explorer Equity Group? Yeah.
So what we were doing is we were forming SPVs. We formed Explorer Equity Group, which is our investing arm of the company. It's separated from an Explorer Partnership. That way, if one of our members, for some reason, goes somewhere else and is not a member of the group anymore, they're still a client for our investing arm. So, we treat them just as we would any client for life, for as long as they're a client. And we formed this group and we were investing in individual companies. We're forming SPVs, as special purpose vehicles, to invest into individual cannabis companies and some other areas. But like I said, we got really involved in cannabis. And the process of doing these SPVs, it's pretty labor intensive, especially as we started to get better and better deal flow within the cannabis industry. You meet one person, there's a CEO of this company and that company, and all of a sudden you're getting opportunities to invest in companies that the general public isn't even seeing. And so through this process, we said, hey, this is crazy. We're doing an SPV almost every couple of weeks. This is way too much work on our end in terms of the back end infrastructure and counting and emails. And it was out of control. So we said, hey, we got to launch a fund. This is insane. We can actually do more deals faster. We can allow our expertise to invest in specific companies instead of trying to relay information back and forth for investors every day. And also, we can take capital for investors who trusted us over the years and who don't want to deal with doing a lot of the work that we were making them do. And they now trust us to use their money and invest it the most strategic way possible.
I just think it's so cool how it just kind of rolled from one great idea to the next great idea. It's just it just seems like everything's just sort of fell into place for you. Let's talk.
Yeah, it might seem that way. But looking back, man, there were so many speed bumps and mistakes and just pains that we went through. And on the outside, it may look like, a calm sea, but underneath, what's that joke? The duck looks super calm on top of the water, but underneath the legs are just paddling like crazy, all frantic. And that's basically the story. And for sure, we've matured and grown, and we're on a very good track now, but it certainly hasn't been without its struggles and difficulties.
Well, you need to get banged up a little bit to get the street credibility, and you certainly have earned that one. Let's talk a little bit about Explorer Equity Group. I know you invest in other sectors, but it's focusing on cannabis. What type of cannabis companies are you interested in investing in, and who are some of the companies who you've already invested in?
Yeah, so first, some of the companies I've invested in, Kush Bottles, now Kush Co., 1906 Edibles out of Colorado, Prohibited, and a variety of others that people have probably heard of. So we don't mind touching a plant. A lot of people say, hey, touching a plant's really risky. We don't mind touching a plant, so we're pretty much industry agnostic. Obviously, the ancillary services and the picks and shovels companies are very attractive, but we also see value in brands that are touching the plant. The only thing we try to avoid is investing in cannabis grows where people are making money specifically from selling cannabis. Now, if it's vertically integrated, we'll look at it, but we generally believe that the cannabis is a commodity, just like corn or wheat or whatever. So it's probably a race to the bottom on the pricing, and we don't want to get stuck in there. We want to be investing in companies that have a great brand, a great service, a great technology or patent, or anything that's really defensible for years to come. We're looking for those types of opportunities.
Okay. You probably see a lot of deals. Oh.
Yeah, a lot.
So
too many.
Yeah, but the best way for a company to get their information to you and some advice as to how they can make themselves attractive to you so they get to the top of your pile.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we look at everything. I'm a nerd when it comes to looking at all companies. Like I said, I'm just curious about it. And regardless if we're going to invest or not, I want to look. I'm just one of those naturally curious people. So I'm very good at answering emails. My email is just cody@explorerequity.com. And people email me every day, all kinds of their ideas. And I encourage more people to do that. And we will take a look at it and get back to you. Either way, we'll say, hey, this looks really interesting. We want more information. Or, hey, this is probably not a good time. Come back to us later. Or, hey, this just doesn't fit our investing profile at all. But either way, we try and get back to everybody, which is a lot of work, but we believe it's the right thing to do and ensures that we're respecting entrepreneurs' time and allows us to really get involved in the industry.
Okay. If there's any way that they can make themselves look more attractive to you?
Yeah, I think that's kind of that X factor. And then what is the perfect entrepreneur? And obviously a track record helps, but there's certainly a lot of younger people coming out with great ideas as well. I think the best thing for us that looks most attractive is just being brutally honest. We despise it when companies come to us and they look perfect and they say, oh, they have no competition. They have none of this, none of that. We want to see, hey, somebody approaching a problem and they're being very, very critical about how they're approaching it. And they're showing us the truth of what they're approaching and how they're going to correct it and what their challenges are. If they are able to articulate that, then we become very interested because we understand that they have a realistic view of the problem they're approaching and how they're going to solve it.
I think that's just good advice overall. If you're just straight with people, it's so much easier.
I mean, investors in general, they're sold to every day and, you get jaded getting sold to. So when you hear somebody just make this flowery story that has no downside or no risk, you immediately call BS on it because it probably is BS.
Right.
So it's a fresh, it's fresh to see somebody come to you and show you their idea, but also identify the problems and articulate why they need capital or help to overcome those problems. That's when it becomes much more believable and go, oh, this is something that's actually investable.
Yeah. All right, that's really good advice. I want to take a minute to tell everyone about an exciting free opportunity that one of our former guests, Good Harvest Company, is offering retail operators and cannabis brand managers in the adult use market. Good Harvest Company is preparing to launch their platform, which uses customers' buying and shopping behaviors to help brands effectively reach their customers. And for a limited time, Good Harvest Company will offer participating companies free access to their data in return for their feedback. To learn more, go to goodharvest.co. Let's switch from the entrepreneur to the investor. So with all the traveling that you do, I'm sure there's a lot of people outside the United States who are interested in investing in the U.S. cannabis market.
Yeah, there are a lot. And I think, well, I know this, the cannabis obviously is a hot trend in the U.S. right now, and most people know about it. But from the outside world, people don't know the actual laws of what's going on in the U.S., meaning state by state. Laws are changing every day, difference between the U.S. and Canada. I mean, you go to some parts of Eastern Europe and they don't really understand the difference between U.S. and Canada, just like we don't understand a lot of the countries over there.
Sure.
So there's a lot of very interested investors saying, well, this is a massive market that is literally being unlocked right now. How do we get in? And the U.S. and Canada in particular are really leading the way in terms of a formalized, legitimate way to invest. And there's going to be a flood of money coming in, but it's going to take its time. And there's going to be a lot of skeptical investors from the outside of the U.S. just because they don't know. And that's part of our job and the industry's job is to educate everybody about what's going on in a way that is clear, concise, and legal all the way as well.
Do you work with investors outside of the United States and Canada?
Yes, actually, probably currently about 30 to 40% of our investors are outside of the U.S. and Canada. So we're talking about from Asia to Europe and even into Latin America. So yes, we work with all kinds of investors.
This rolls me right into my next question. If somebody wants to work with you guys and wants to invest in your funds, what are some of the criteria that they'd have to conform to?
I mean, we don't really have criteria in the sense that we're not going to not allow people to invest, obviously, any fund or somebody who's investing is going to take money from any investor. I shouldn't say any, but we're looking for people that believe in what we're doing and believe in our long-term vision and also understand that we are in this for a long time. We want to be partners with our investors because if they make money, we're going to make money.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't make money, we don't make money. So this is very much a partnership and for the long term. So we want to ensure that we shake hands with our investors, meet them face to face. We travel to meet them. We want to make this a long-term thing so we can all be successful together.
And if they wanted to get in touch with you, same way, right? To Cody at
or just CodyExploreEquity.com, or just go to exploreequity.com and you can find all the information, or just search my name online. You can just send smoke signals and I'll find out who you are and we'll get in contact.
Well, we've been speaking with Cody Shirk from Explorer Equity Group, and all of their information will also be on the MJBulls website. So, well, Cody, thanks for being on the MJBulls podcast.
Hey, Dan, thank you so much, and thanks for what you're doing for this industry. I will say this industry does need to be cleaned up, and nobody wants to hear it, but that's the truth, and that's what we need. Is we need more people sharing information about what's going on so it can be clear and transparent and move forward in a legal and the right way.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, but thank you for making that transition from, although being a firefighter is very important. It's very important. I don't want to undermine that, but what you're doing right now, you're going to be changing the world. So this is good. Keep it up.
I hope we all do. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Let me take a second to thank Trevitt Hill for sponsoring today's show. Cannabis investors expect big returns from the companies that they invest in. Unfortunately, not all cannabis investments succeed. Trevitt Hill's management team works with investors to help turn around, or in some cases purchase, their underperforming portfolio companies. To learn more, go to trevitthill.com. Thanks for listening to the MJBulls podcast. To learn more about today's guest or to become a guest, visit our website at MJBulls.com. Today's show was produced by Bumminit Media, with original music composed by Jamie Humiston. I'm Dan Humiston, and you've been listening to the MJBulls podcast.